Welcome back to the Crypto World channel, everyone. My name is Josh, and right now, Bitcoin is playing out this new signal on the chart, and in just a couple of hours from now, we have the next Fed meeting, which could heavily affect the markets in the short term. And on top of that, Bitcoin is also now playing out this new pattern while rejecting from critical short-term resistance, but is now about to run into critical short-term support as the liquidation heat map is revealing new price targets that we need to pay attention to. And on top of that, Ethereum is still potentially repeating history, but is now flashing a new warning signal. So I'll be talking about all of that and so much more later in the video, so definitely watch to the end. First of all, we need to talk about the upcoming FOMC meeting, also known as a Fed meeting, which is happening in just a few hours from now. In fact, we'll get the Fed interest rate decision at exactly 7 p.m. in the GMT time zone today. And if you're wondering what that time is in your current time zone, simply look up on Google what the GMT time is right now, and you can work it out that way. But basically, it's happening in just a few hours from now, and I will be covering it in real time over on my Twitter. So if you want those real-time updates throughout the day, then make sure to follow me over on my Twitter, link down below in the description and in the pinned comment. And I covered all of this in more detail in my last video here on the channel, so if you missed that video, definitely watch that video within the next few hours. But just giving you a quick recap of what's happening here and what we should be expecting. First of all, right now, the Fed funds rate is sitting at 5.5% on the high end, and the majority of the market is expecting 5.5%, which means no change in interest rates. And if we're taking a look at what the futures market is currently pricing in, once again, right now, the Fed funds rate is sitting at 5.5% on the high end, which is 550 basis points. And as of right now, around 98% of the market is pricing in for no change in interest rates, and around 2% of the market is expecting an interest rate cut by 25 basis points, so reducing interest rates by 0.25%. And so basically, if we see no change in interest rates, that should be very neutral for markets. We shouldn't really see any major move based on that outcome, because once again, that is the outcome that basically everyone is already expecting and pricing into the market. So if we get no change in interest rates, because everyone is already expecting it, we shouldn't really see anything too major in the markets. But if we end up seeing another outcome, like for example, that interest rate cut or somehow an interest rate hike, then that is where we could see a lot more volatility. And basically, the lower interest rates are, the more bullish that should be, and the higher interest rates are, the more bearish that should be. And so basically, if we somehow see an interest rate hike, which means raising interest rates, which by the way, pretty much no one is expecting, but if we somehow see the Fed raise interest rates today, then we'll likely see a dump across the markets. But on the other hand, if we see that interest rate cut, so if the Federal Reserve decides to reduce interest rates today, then it will likely see a pump across the markets. And now, even if we see this neutral outcome, which is no change in interest rates, if that happens, once again, as soon as that decision comes out at 7 p.m. in the GMT time zone, once again, that should be neutral for the market. But roughly around half an hour after we get that rate decision, there is the Jerome Powell press conference, where Jerome Powell, basically the boss of the Federal Reserve, speaks on potential future Fed rate cuts or rate hikes. And basically, depending on what Jerome Powell says in that press conference, happening around half an hour after we get the rate decision, of course, that can affect the market just in the short term, because the market can be pricing in for different things based on what Jerome Powell says in the press conference. And once again, I'll be covering all of that in real time over on my Twitter. So as soon as the new numbers get released, as soon as the interest rate decision gets released, I'll be sure to tweet that out in real time. And if anything major happens in that press conference, whether it's bullish or bearish, I'll be sharing that in real time over on my Twitter. Once again, links down below this video. And taking a look at some Bitcoin ETF news today, just over the last one day, just yesterday, Grayscale sent another approximately 6,200 Bitcoin worth around $270 million US over towards Coinbase to dump on the market. But as I've been talking about over the last few days, even though Grayscale is still dumping Bitcoin every weekday, of course, the amount that they are actually dumping is reducing. Because, for example, just last week, they were dumping closer towards 15 to 20,000 Bitcoin each day. And then just 1 to 2 days ago, they were dumping around 10,000 each day. And right now, only around 6,000 over the last 1 day. And so, of course, if these outflows slow down, that means less selling pressure from Grayscale. And obviously, less selling pressure is good news for Bitcoin. That is bullish for Bitcoin if we're seeing less selling pressure. And as of right now, Grayscale is now holding just underneath 500,000 Bitcoin, still worth over 21 billion US dollars. And so obviously they still hold a lot of Bitcoin, but either way, once again, the outflows, the daily outflows each weekday, at least over the last few days, have indeed been slowing down compared to previously. And at the time of recording this video, we have not yet seen the newly updated numbers from BlackRock. So of course, these numbers are still the same numbers as what we saw yesterday. And so at least for now, once again, at the time of recording this video, we do not yet know the exact amount of Bitcoin that BlackRock bought over the last one day. But as always, when the new information gets released, of course, I'll be sharing that over on my Twitter when we actually know exactly how much BlackRock bought or perhaps sold over the last one day. But anyway, getting into some Bitcoin charts today, looking at the daily Bitcoin chart, and at least as of right now, the bearish divergence on the daily time frame is technically still active because we have not yet confirmed any invalidation signals here in the price or in the RSI. And those invalidation signals would be, for example, some higher lows or higher highs in the price or the RSI, or if we simply see a confirmed breakout above this descending line of resistance in the daily Bitcoin RSI, that can also act as an invalidation signal for the bearish divergence, invalidating the bearish divergence. And so once again, at least for now, while the RSI is still trading below this descending line of resistance, of course, at least for now, the bearish divergence is still currently active, which means we should not necessarily flip overly bullish again, at least in the short term. But if we're taking a look at the daily Bitcoin MACD, as I've said over the last half a week or so, of course, this has now flipped more bullish, showing some bullish momentum, at least in the short term. And so simply based on the MACD, this is telling us that we're seeing a slight bullish recovery, but not looking overly bullish. We're not seeing a massive amount of bullish momentum. And once again, I would start to flip much more bullish again if we see a breakout here in the RSI to invalidate the bearish divergence. And as for these areas of support on the daily time frame, these have not changed over the last one day. So if you want to know more about those, then check out my last few videos here on the channel. And something similar can be said about the DXY, also known as the US dollar index, which is still currently trading sideways pretty much. And so at least for now, this is not really having much of an effect on the price of Bitcoin while it is currently trading sideways. And so if we're zooming into the short term, looking at the 2-hour Bitcoin chart, what we can now see is this short-term bearish divergence now playing out, which I did talk about in my last video. And so obviously, since my last video, which I recorded right around here when the price was running into this critical resistance, obviously we have seen a little bit of a short-term pullback, which is one of the most likely outcomes from a bearish divergence. But of course, we still have this area of support, which is sitting in between around 41.7K to 42.2K. And so, of course, we could still bounce around that area of support. And in that case, for as long as we're holding above that area of support, above these previous lows, technically this short-term bullish trend here, this short-term bullish recovery could still continue for as long as we bounce at this area of support and do not break below it. And if we do end up bouncing at that area of support or even above that area of support, then I would expect the price to come back up towards this resistance, which once again is sitting in between around 43.3K to 43.6K approximately. And at that point, I'd flip much more bullish again if we first see a confirmed breakout back above this resistance, which as of right now, obviously has not happened. And so at least in the immediate short term, once again, we should be expecting a little bit more of a break from that bullish relief, from that short-term bullish trend in the form of either some slight bearish price action or some choppy sideways price action as the most likely scenarios in the short term. And that is simply due to the fact that the bearish divergence is playing out at the same time as the price rejecting from key resistance. But once again, if we do continue a little bit lower, then we should expect support in that price range that I just mentioned earlier. And if we end up confirming a higher low in the price of Bitcoin above these previous lows, then we could end up playing out a hidden bullish divergence, because if we have higher lows in the price and lower lows in the RSI, of course, that's a hidden bullish divergence. And we have already confirmed the lower lows in the RSI. And so all we need to see now is some sort of decent bounce from that area of support in order to confirm that hidden bullish divergence, which is a bullish trend continuation pattern. But once again, right now, we are not there just yet. We're still currently playing out this bearish divergence, at least in the imminent short term. And as I've been saying since all the way back around here, while the price of Bitcoin is in between this area of support and this area of resistance, we're looking relatively neutral, at least in the short term. And so once again, I would only start to flip much more bullish again if we see a confirmed breakout above this resistance. And of course, if we break back below these previous lows, so break back below this area of support, obviously that would be a short-term bearish signal. And just before talking about some important price targets for Bitcoin in that scenario, of course, if you want to trade these moves in the price of Bitcoin, whether we're bullish or bearish, personally, I take those trades over on Bybit. So I'll make sure to leave a link to Bybit in the description down below and in the pinned comment. And if you use that link to make a Bybit account and deposit on that account, you can get up to a $30,000 deposit bonus, but only if you use that link down below this video. But for whatever reason, if you cannot access Bybit or if you cannot KYC on Bybit, there is also Bitflex, which is another crypto exchange similar to Bybit, but you don't need KYC for Bitflex. And so I will also make sure to leave a link to Bitflex in the description down below and in the pinned comment. And if you use that link to make a Bitflex account and deposit $100 worth of crypto and make one trade over on Bitflex, then you can get 10 USDT completely for free, along with other new deposit bonuses. And so if you're trading crypto anyway, or if you're preparing to take the next trade, you might as well get set up ready to go on one of those exchanges using those links down below this video if you want to get those extra bonuses. And if we're taking a quick look at the 8-hour Bitcoin chart, right now the price of Bitcoin is playing out this signal that I mentioned in my last video, because as I said yesterday, the 8-hour Bitcoin RSI and also the RSI on smaller time frames is basically getting very close, if not entering into overbought territories. And now here on the 8-hour time frame, we did not fully go into overbought territories, but we got very close to overbought territories. And on smaller time frames, of course, we did enter into overbought territories for the price of Bitcoin. And as you can see here, when the RSI enters into overbought territories, that basically means, at least in the short term, we have limited room to the upside. And so we should be expecting some sort of short-term cool-off sometime soon. And that cool-off can play out in the form of bearish price action or neutral price action, because both neutral price action and bearish price action can help to reset the RSI. And so once again, right now, we're simply playing out a bit of a short-term cool-off, basically a break from that bullish relief to reset the RSI, which can actually give us more room to the upside later on. And so, of course, the bullish scenario would be if we see a little bit more of a rejection from this resistance, perhaps bounce at around this area of support, then in that case, we could form that hidden bullish divergence. And obviously, in that scenario, we could retest this resistance. And then if we break out above that resistance, in that case, the RSI could be reset already, giving us more room to the upside once we break out above that resistance. But that entire bullish scenario really relies on the Bitcoin price holding above this area of support. Once again, if we break below this area of support, then that is where we can set up bearish price targets. And so if we confirm a break back below around 41.6k to 41.7k, then in that case, looking at some bearish price targets based on the liquidation heat map. First of all, we now have some initial liquidity to the downside sitting at around 41.5k to 41.7k. And so, of course, that is sitting right around the low end of this area of support right here. And so it's possible we could just hit that area of liquidity before bouncing. Once again, that is a possibility. But if we break below that area of support that I just mentioned, then in that bearish scenario, if we break below that area of support, then in that case, I would expect a drop down towards around 39.7k. And we'd also have a lot of liquidity sitting at around 39.3k to 39,500. And so basically, we will likely see a drop in the price of Bitcoin down towards 39,500 to 40,000, basically in that price range around there, if we actually break below this area of support, which obviously is not guaranteed. And so at the moment, we're just waiting for that extra signal to confirm in order to set up those bearish price targets. But once again, until we see a break below that area of support, as of right now, we're looking relatively neutral, at least in the short term, while we're still between this support and this resistance. But anyway, getting into the Ethereum part of this video, this is on the daily time frame, and right now the bearish divergence is technically still active, meaning we should not really be expecting a significant amount of bullish momentum, at least in the short term. And if we're taking a look at the daily Ethereum MACD, this is currently showing a reduced bearish momentum trending towards a bullish cross, but we have not yet confirmed a bullish cross. And so basically what this means based on the price oscillators is that right now we have a relatively low momentum to either direction, which is why we're not really seeing a strong move to either direction. We're basically still chopping around sideways here on the daily time frame, at least in the shorter term. And if we're zooming into the short term, looking at the 4-hour time frame, obviously we're continuing that bounce from this area of support, which I've been talking about since all the way back down here. And this area of support still sitting in between around 2170 to around 2.2k. And as I've also been talking about pretty much every day here on the channel since all the way back down here, right now the price of ETH is basically playing out a fractal, very similar price structure compared to what we saw back here. And so this is why I have been more bullish again in the short term since all the way back down here, because once again, we have similar price structure with two major bounces from this area of support, similar to what we saw previously. And since then, we have seen some higher lows put in place in the price of ETH, also similar to this previous price structure. But what we're now seeing in the 4-hour Ethereum RSI is, of course, the RSI entering into overbought territories for the first time since all the way back here on around the 11th of January. And if we're looking at what happened previously, of course, that happened just after a major pump in the price of ETH and just before a bearish trend reversal. And now it's important to understand that this overbought signal in the RSI on the 4-hour time frame by itself does not guarantee a massive bearish trend reversal, because even though it happened that one time previously, most of the time it just means we have limited room to the upside in the immediate short term. And so over the coming hours, maybe over the coming days, we're due to see either a slight pullback or some choppy sideways price action to reset the RSI. And we're already seeing a bit of a pullback in the short term, resetting the RSI. And so now that we're seeing that pullback, resetting the RSI out of those overbought territories back down towards more neutral levels, technically this is now giving us more room to the upside to continue this short-term bullish trend or this bullish relief. And if we're zooming all the way into the 2-hour time frame, of course, this bullish divergence that I've been talking about since all the way back down here is technically still active and playing out. And of course, I mentioned in my last video that there's the possibility of a bearish divergence forming here. But as I mentioned in my last video, we do not really have a lot of confirmation confirming that bearish divergence. And so as of right now, this short-term bullish divergence is still playing out, which once again means this bullish relief or short-term bullish trend is still currently active. And if we're taking a quick look at the price of Solana on the 8-hour time frame, over the last one day, we have just recently seen a rejection very close to this level of resistance, which is sitting at around $108. And as of right now, at the time of recording this video, we're currently running into this short-term support sitting at around $98. But if we break back below $98, then we could drop down towards around $91 to $92. And below that area of support, we also have more support at the golden pocket sitting in between around $83.50 to $85.50. And once again, as I said in my last video here on the channel, the 8-hour Solana RSI entered into overbought territories, meaning we have limited room to the upside, at least in the short term, which usually plays out in the form of either a slight pullback or some choppy sideways price action to help reset the RSI. And we're also still potentially forming an inverse head and shoulders pattern here on the 8-hour time frame for the price of Solana, because these highs right here, this line of resistance right here, could be a neckline. And right now we have a left shoulder and a head. And so all we need to see now is a further rejection to form a right shoulder and then a bounce back to the upside to break out above this resistance, sitting at around $106, give or take. And so if we end up seeing that playing out, then that would set up a bullish price target to the upside, considering an inverse head and shoulders pattern is a bullish pattern. And so obviously that would be very bullish for the price of Solana if we first see a further rejection and then a bounce back up above these highs. But either way, whether we're bearish or bullish or simply chopping around sideways, you can make money in all of that price action if you watch these videos popping up right here on your screen. Because the video in the top left shows you how to make money if the price is bullish or bearish using longs and shorts. And the video in the bottom left shows you how you can easily profit from choppy sideways price action. But anyway, that is everything that I have to say for today. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you all in the next video.